A homeless woman could not believe her eyes when she decided to ask Melania Trump for $1 in the streets of New York. The collision of two worlds, one of unfathomable luxury and the other of desperate survival, rarely occurs with such consequential reverberations as it did on that rainy Tuesday in Providence, Rhode Island. When Penelope Thorne, a 62-year-old former master violinist, now living in her weathered Subaru station wagon, approached the elegantly dressed woman seeking temporary shelter under the same portico of the historic Blackstone Hotel, neither woman could have imagined how their momentary interaction would ultimately expose buried secrets, challenge long-held perceptions, and eventually lead to a humanitarian initiative that would transform the landscape of homelessness in America. A simple request, "Can you spare $1?" would become the catalyst for an extraordinary chain of events that would leave both women irrevocably changed and connect them in ways that defied the vast socioeconomic chasm between them. Penelope's fingers, once capable of coaxing transcendent melodies from the finest violins in concert halls across Europe, now ached with early arthritis as she clutched her rain-dampened cardboard sign. The downpour had begun suddenly, typical of Providence's mercurial spring weather, sending pedestrians scurrying for cover. She had hurriedly gathered her few possessions, a tattered backpack containing her medications, a photo album, and a small pouch holding her most precious possession, a polished maplewood violin Rosen box, the last remnant of her former life. The woman who had taken shelter in the same doorway stood with her back turned, speaking rapidly into her cell phone in what Penelope recognized as accented English. Slavic undertones, expertly muted but still detectable to Penelope's musician's ear, finely tuned to the subtle variations of sound and inflection. The stranger wore an impeccably tailored cream-colored raincoat, her chestnut hair swept into an elegant chignon. Even from behind, everything about her suggested wealth, privilege, and the particular kind of poise that comes from moving through the world without financial constraints. Normally, Penelope wouldn't have approached someone of this caliber. Her panhandling, a necessity she'd adopted with tremendous reluctance after her savings had finally been depleted 6 months earlier, targeted middle-class shoppers and business people, those who might spare a few dollars without feeling either insulted by the request or compelled to call the authorities. But the rain was intensifying, the temperature dropping, and she needed $12 more to secure a bed at the women's shelter on Mathewson Street for the night. Summoning what remained of her dignity, a commodity she guarded as fiercely as the few possessions that had survived her descent into homelessness, Penelope cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me," she began, her voice still carrying the cultured cadence that had once charmed symphony patrons at post-performance galas. "I hate to disturb you, but I'm trying to get enough money for the shelter tonight. Could you possibly spare $1?" The woman ended her call abruptly and turned around. Penelope's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. The perfectly composed features, the distinctive eyes, unmistakable despite the absence of the usual professional makeup and camera-ready styling. Standing before her, looking momentarily startled by the interruption, was Melania Trump. I'm so sorry to bother you," Penelope stammered, taking an instinctive step back. What was the First Lady doing alone in Providence, without the security detail that normally surrounded public figures of her stature? Melania's expression was impossible to read, not unkind, but guarded. Those eyes, which had gazed out from thousands of photographs, studied Penelope with an intensity that made her acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance. "It is raining very hard," Melania said finally, her accent more pronounced than it had been in her carefully rehearsed public speeches. She glanced at Penelope's sign, then at the violin Rosen box partially visible in the older woman's coat pocket. "You are musician?" The question, unexpected and direct, momentarily disarmed Penelope. "I was," she replied, unconsciously straightening her posture as if preparing for an audition. First violin with the Vienna Philharmonic, and later the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Something shifted in Melania's expression, a flicker of genuine interest breaking through the practiced neutrality. "Classical training? Conservatory?" "Juilliard and then Vienna Conservatory," Penelope answered, a ghost of pride animating her voice. Melania nodded, as if confirming something to herself. She opened her handbag, an understated but unmistakably expensive leather tote, and Penelope prepared herself for the familiar routine: the awkward extraction of a small bill, the careful placement that avoided any possibility of physical contact, the quick retreat that would follow. Instead, Melania withdrew her phone again. "This rain will not stop soon. Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere dry." She gestured toward the hotel's ornate entrance. "I was about to have tea in the lobby. Would you join me?" Penelope blinked, certain she had misheard. "You're inviting me to tea?" "Yes," Melania replied simply. "Unless you have another appointment?" The absurdity of the question, as if Penelope's day might be filled with scheduled engagements rather than the exhausting cycle of seeking food, shelter, and safety, almost made her laugh. But there was no condescension in Melania's tone, just a straightforward inquiry. "No," Penelope said carefully. "No other appointments." A faint smile touched Melania's lips. "Then it is decided." As they entered the hotel's grand lobby together, Penelope acutely felt the stark contrast between them. Her worn clothing, dampened by rain and marked by the unmistakable signs of living rough, seemed to scream her homelessness in the opulent surroundings. She was painfully aware of the hotel staff's expressions, the barely concealed shock, the swift assessment that categorized her as unwelcome, followed by confusion as they registered her companion's identity. The maitre d' approached with a practiced smile that faltered visibly upon noticing Penelope. "Madam, I'm afraid—" he began. "Table for two, please," Melania interrupted smoothly. "Somewhere quiet." Recognition dawned in the man's eyes. "Mrs. Trump, of course, right away. Please follow me." They were escorted to a secluded corner of the tea lounge, sheltered by potted palms and positioned far from the curious gazes of other patrons. Penelope sank gratefully into the plush armchair, trying to make herself inconspicuous despite the impossibility of the task. "Thank you for the invitation," she said quietly, once they were seated. "But I'm curious. Why?" Melania considered her before answering. "Perhaps I recognized something familiar," she replied cryptically. She ordered for both of them, a full tea service with additional sandwiches, before turning her attention back to Penelope. "Now tell me how first violinist becomes homeless in America. This is not typical career progression, I think." The unexpected humor, delivered with such deadpan precision, startled a genuine laugh from Penelope. "No, not typical at all." As their tea arrived, an elaborate spread of delicate sandwiches, scones, and pastries arranged on a tiered silver stand, Penelope found herself sharing the story she had told no one in its entirety. How, at 58, she had developed a tremor in her left hand that gradually worsened, ultimately ending her performing career. How her husband of 30 years had left shortly after, unwilling to adjust to their newly constrained financial circumstances, and her depression. How the medical bills had accumulated despite her insurance, especially after the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease that followed. How she had sold their condo, then her violin, a devastating parting that still brought tears to her eyes, then everything else of value, trying to stay afloat. The final straw was the pandemic, Penelope explained, unconsciously straightening the napkin in her lap, muscle memory from decades of formal dinners asserting itself. "I had been teaching private lessons, but those dried up overnight. Then the small inheritance I'd been living on was lost when my financial advisor turned out to be running a Ponzi scheme." She smiled wryly. A rather comprehensive series of catastrophes. Melania listened with surprising attentiveness, asking occasional questions that revealed a more perceptive intelligence than public perception typically credited her with. "And your family? No children or siblings who can help?" "My brother died years ago. No children." Penelope hesitated. "There's a niece in California, but we've been estranged for years. Pride has kept me from reaching out. Foolish, perhaps, but pride is sometimes all that remains when everything else is gone." Something like recognition flickered in Melania's eyes. Pride is not foolish. Sometimes it is the only thing that keeps you standing. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. You know who I am, obviously. Does it not make you uncomfortable to sit here with me, given my husband's reputation? The directness of the question took Penelope aback. I try not to judge people solely by their associations, she answered carefully. Though I admit I wouldn't have expected to be having tea with you today. Life is full of unexpected moments, Melania replied, like accomplished musicians becoming homeless, or models becoming first ladies. She set down her cup with a decisive motion. I am in Providence for personal reasons. A private matter unrelated to my husband. I have been reconsidering many things recently. Before she could elaborate, a hotel staff member approached their table with evident discomfort. Excuse me, Mrs. Trump. The manager sends his compliments and wishes to inform you that we've arranged for additional security at the entrances, as word of your presence has begun to circulate. Thank you, Melania replied with a slight nod of dismissal. As the staff member retreated, Penelope sighed. I should probably go. I'm creating complications for you and I still need to figure out shelter for tonight. You have not finished your tea, Melania observed, gesturing to Penelope's half-full cup. And I have proposition for you. Proposition? I am developing a foundation, Melania explained, lowering her voice. Separate from previous initiatives, something entirely my own, focused on arts education and preservation of cultural heritage. I have been conducting research privately during my stay here, meeting with potential partners from Brown University and Rhode Island School of Design. Penelope nodded, uncertain where this was headed. The foundation also has secondary mission involving elder care and housing security for artists and musicians in their later years. Melania's gaze was direct, assessing. Your situation represents precisely the problem my initiative aims to address. The intersection of aging, artistic professionals, healthcare challenges, and housing insecurity. I'm not sure I understand, Penelope said slowly. I need consultants with first-hand experience, Melania clarified. People who understand these challenges from inside, not just theoretical policy experts. I would like to offer you position, temporary at first, with possibility to become permanent. Consulting fee would include immediate housing stipend and health care coverage. Penelope stared, certain she had misunderstood. You're offering me a job? You don't even know me. I know enough, Melania countered. You have relevant professional expertise and personal experience. You speak well, present yourself with dignity despite difficult circumstances, and have maintained your mental acuity. These are qualifications. Penelope's mind raced. Was this real? A cruel joke? Some kind of publicity stunt? Why would you do this for a stranger? Something vulnerable flickered briefly across Melania's carefully composed features. Perhaps I understand more than people realize about finding oneself in unexpected circumstances, making difficult choices, being judged by association rather than individual merit. Before Penelope could respond, commotion erupted near the hotel entrance. A small crowd had gathered outside, smartphone cameras pressed against the windows. Someone had evidently leaked Melania's presence, and the predictable media response was unfolding. It seems our conversation must continue elsewhere, Melania observed calmly, signaling for the check. My car is waiting at the service entrance. Will you continue this discussion at more private location? Penelope hesitated, balanced on the knife edge of decision. Every instinct honed by years on the streets warned against getting into a car with a stranger, even a famous one. Yet something in Melania's direct gaze suggested genuine intent rather than duplicity. And if I decline? Then I wish you good luck and provide contact information should you reconsider, Melania replied without hesitation. This is an opportunity, not an obligation. Penelope thought of the women's shelter, with its narrow cots and limited privacy, the constant vigilance required to protect her few remaining possessions. She thought of tomorrow's forecast, more rain, more hours spent seeking minimal sustenance. She thought of her dwindling medication supply and the increasing difficulty of managing her condition without consistent health care. Yes, she said finally. I'll come with you. Minutes later, they slipped through the service entrance where a discreet black SUV waited, its driver opening the door without comment or visible reaction to Penelope's appearance. As they settled into the leather interior, Melania reached into her bag and withdrew a small business card, handing it to Penelope. "Horizon Foundation," Penelope read aloud, noting the minimal design, just the name, a phone number, and a small stylized sunrise logo. "Your foundation?" "Still in development," Melania confirmed as the car pulled away from the curb. "Very few know about it. I have been planning this since leaving Washington. Something independent, separate from previous associations." Penelope studied the First Lady with new interest. "You're reinventing yourself." A smile, genuine, not the practiced curve that had appeared in thousands of photographs, briefly transformed Melania's face. "Perhaps we both are." As the car navigated through Providence's rain-slicked streets, neither woman noticed the hotel busboy who had served their tea surreptitiously uploading a photo to social media. The caption read simply, "Melania Trump just had tea with a homeless woman at Blackstone Hotel. They left together. Something strange is happening." By morning, the image would accumulate over 1 million views and spark speculation ranging from cynical PR stunts to elaborate conspiracy theories. No one would guess the truth, that in that rainy chance encounter, two women from vastly different worlds had recognized in each other a shared quality: the determination to define themselves on their own terms, regardless of circumstances or public perception. The SUV turned into a tree-lined street in Providence's historic district, slowing as it approached a discreetly elegant boutique hotel. Penelope gazed up at the understated facade, trying to quell the anxiety bubbling beneath her momentary calm. Was she making a terrible mistake or taking the first step toward reclaiming her life? As if sensing her thoughts, Melania spoke. "I understand your hesitation," she said quietly. "Trust is luxury when you have been disappointed many times." "Why are you really doing this?" Penelope asked, needing certainty before proceeding further. "Is it guilt? Charity? A public relations exercise?" "Perhaps all those things," Melania admitted with unexpected frankness. "But also something else. Opportunity to create a legacy independent of expectations or existing narratives. To help people like you while helping myself define a new chapter." She paused, then added, "And perhaps opportunity to correct certain imbalances." Before Penelope could press for clarification, the driver opened her door, and the moment for questions passed. As they entered the hotel, a far more discreet establishment than the Blackstone, with an air of quiet exclusivity, Penelope clutched her weathered backpack tighter, acutely aware of crossing a threshold that separated her recent past from a suddenly uncertain future. What neither woman could possibly know was how their chance encounter would ripple outward in the coming days, setting in motion events that would challenge both their carefully constructed defenses and ultimately force confrontations with the powerful figures each had, in their own way, been trying to escape.